Ethan Carter clutched his piggy bank savings in a crowded Los Angeles toy store, his small frame dwarfed by the holiday bustle. Nearby, a wealthy shopper sneered at his crumpled bills, judgment dripping from her gaze. But then Keanu Reeves walked in, unassuming, kind, and about to change everything. What happened next would leave the store buzzing and transform one family's life forever. Before we dive into this heartwarming tale, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. If you love inspiring stories like this, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we've got another unforgettable story waiting for you. Ethan Carter stood in the toy store, his small hands trembling as he clutched a fistful of coins and crumpled dollar bills. $17.36, every penny he'd scraped together over months of saving. At 12 years old, Ethan was no stranger to wanting things he couldn't have. But tonight was different. It was December 2013, and the air outside buzzed with the promise of Christmas, a holiday that always felt just out of reach for him and his mom, Lena Carter. Still, inside his chest, a warmth flickered, a determination to make this year special for her. He'd walked 2 miles from their tiny, run-down apartment in Los Angeles, the kind of place where the walls were thin and the heat barely worked, to buy her a gift with the money he'd kept hidden in a cracked piggy bank under his bed. Lena was 34, a single mom who'd been Ethan's whole world since his dad walked out when he was barely 2. She worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat, waitressing at a greasy diner during the day, where tips were scarce and the customers ruder than they needed to be, and cleaning offices at night, mopping floors while the city slept. Her hands were rough from years of labor, her eyes tired but always bright when she looked at Ethan. Money was tight, tighter than Ethan wished she'd admit. The rent ate up most of her paychecks, and what was left went to food, secondhand clothes, and the occasional treat she'd sneak in for him, like a candy bar or a library book she'd pretend was new. She never complained, though. She'd turn their cramped one-bedroom into a home with her laughter, her stories, and the way she'd tuck him in every night, no matter how late she got back. Ethan knew how much Christmas meant to her, even if they never had much to show for it. Their tree was a fake, foot-high thing they'd had forever, decorated with popcorn strings and a single strand of lights that flickered more than it shone. Lena loved the season anyway. She'd hum carols while cooking their modest meals, her voice soft but steady. A few weeks back, they'd passed a shop window downtown, and she'd stopped in front of a snow globe, the kind with glitter swirling around a little house nestled in a winter scene. "Isn't that pretty?" she'd said, her tone wistful. "Maybe someday." Then she'd squeezed his hand and kept walking, like it was nothing. But Ethan saw the longing in her eyes, the kind she buried so he wouldn't feel the weight of their struggles, that someday stuck with him, and he'd decided it would be today. He'd counted his savings over and over, memorizing the price tag, $17, hoping it hadn't changed. The walk to the store had been cold, but his heart raced with purpose. He wasn't just buying a gift, he was giving her a moment of joy, something to lighten the load she carried every day. Lena deserved that. She deserved more than the world had ever given her. Ethan knew it wasn't fair, how she worked herself to the bone while others had so much more. At school, he'd watch kids show off new sneakers or talk about family vacations, things he couldn't even dream of asking for. Their parents didn't come home with aching backs or skip meals to save a few bucks. Ethan wasn't jealous, not really. He had Lena, and that was enough. But he couldn't shake the sting of it, the way society seemed to shrug at people like them. Lena never let him feel small, though. She'd tell him stories about her dreams, how she'd wanted to be a teacher, to stand in front of a classroom and help kids like him grow. She'd started college once, back before he was born, but life got in the way. She'd had him young, alone, and the world hadn't been kind about it. People judged her, a single mom with no degree, no husband, no safety net. She'd dropped out to raise him, taking whatever jobs she could find, and never once made him feel like a burden. "You're my reason," she'd say, when he caught her staring at him with that quiet pride. "Everything I do, it's for you." Ethan didn't have the words to tell her how much he hated that she'd had to give up so much. How he wished he could give it all back. That's why he was here, in this crowded store, weaving through shoppers who barely noticed him. He found the snow globe on a shelf, its delicate beauty calling to him like a promise. He picked it up, cradling it carefully, and headed to the counter, his pulse quickening. This was it, the moment he'd been waiting for. He wanted to see her smile, really smile, the way she used to, before the years wore her down. Lena had sacrificed everything for him, and tonight he'd show her what she meant to him. But as he reached the cashier, ready to hand over his carefully counted money, he had no idea that fate and a stranger named Keanu Reeves was about to step in and turn his small act of love into something extraordinary. Ethan stood at the counter, the snow globe cradled in his hands like a fragile dream. Its glitter swirled lazily inside, catching the store's fluorescent light, and for a moment he could almost see his mom's face lighting up when she opened it. His chest swelled with pride as he dumped his pile of coins and wrinkled bills onto the counter, the cashier glancing at him with a mix of pity and impatience. "That's $17.36, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the nervous flutter in his stomach. He'd counted it a dozen times, memorized the price tag from weeks ago, $17, right there in black and white. But the cashier shook his head, his tone clipped. "Sorry, kid, price went up last week. It's $22 now." The words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. His hands froze mid-air, coins clinking as they slipped from his fingers. $22? He dug into his pockets, pulling out a few more pennies and a lint-covered dime, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. His throat tightened, a hot sting building behind his eyes. He'd walked 2 miles, counted every cent, planned this for months, only to fall short. The snow globe sat there, mocking him, a reminder of how close he'd come to giving his mom something beautiful. He mumbled an apology, turning to leave, the weight of failure pressing down on his small shoulders. He didn't want the cashier to see him cry. Not here, not now. That's when he heard it, a deep, gentle voice cutting through the hum of the store. "Hey, let me help with that." Ethan stopped, his sneakers squeaking on the tile. He turned around, and there he was, Keanu Reeves. Even with a scruffy beard and a worn baseball cap pulled low, Ethan knew him instantly. The guy from the movies his mom loved. The one whose quiet strength seemed to leap off the screen. The cashier's jaw dropped, but Ethan just stood there, rooted, unsure if this was real. Keanu crouched down to his level, his eyes kind and steady, a soft smile breaking through the shadow of his cap. It was like a light piercing the dark fog that had settled over Ethan's heart. "You buying this for someone special?" Keanu asked, nodding at the snow globe still clutched in Ethan's hands. Ethan swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. "For my mom, she works a lot. She saw it a while back and liked it." He didn't know why he said it, why the words tumbled out so easily, but something about Keanu made him feel safe, like he could tell him anything. Keanu's expression softened, a flicker of something deeper passing through his gaze. He stood up, pulling a crisp $50 bill from his wallet and handing it to the cashier. "This one's on me," he said, his tone casual but firm. "And give the kids some change, okay?" Ethan blinked, stunned. "Thank you," he managed, the words small against the gratitude swelling inside him. But Keanu wasn't done. He tilted his head, studying Ethan with a warmth that felt almost too big for the moment. "I've got a soft spot for moms," he said. "She sounds pretty amazing. What's her name?" "Lena," Ethan replied, a shy smile tugging at his lips. Keanu's grin widened. "Well, Ethan, let's make sure Lena has a Christmas she won't forget." Before Ethan could process it, Keanu gestured toward the aisles. "Mind if I help you pick out something else for her?" Ethan nodded, dazed, as they started walking through the store together. It was surreal. Keanu Reeves, a movie star, asking him questions like they were old friends. "What is Lena like?" he asked, pausing by a rack of scarves. "What's she into?" Ethan hesitated, then opened up. "She works all the time, waitressing and cleaning offices. She doesn't get much for herself, but she loves kids. She wanted to be a teacher once." His voice cracked, guilt creeping in. "She couldn't finish school because of me." Keanu stopped, turning to face him fully, his eyes searching Ethan's face. "Hey," he said softly, "don't carry that. She chose you because you're worth it. Trust me. I can tell she's one of the good ones." The words sank into Ethan like a balm, soothing a hurt he hadn't even named. Keanu picked up a cozy blue scarf, holding it up. This looks like something she'd love. Warm, practical, perfect for a mom who's always on the go. Ethan nodded, tears prickling his eyes. He couldn't believe this was happening. Someone seeing his mom the way he did. Someone caring enough to help. As they headed back to the counter, people started to notice. Whispers rippled through the crowd, phones slipping out to snap pictures. Keanu paid for the scarf without a fuss, handing the bag to Ethan with that same easy smile, like it was nothing. But to Ethan, it was everything. "You know," Keanu said, crouching again, "this isn't just about the gifts. When you give these to her, tell her it's from someone who thinks she raised an amazing kid." Ethan's breath hitched, a tear escaping down his cheek. "I will," he whispered, clutching the bag tighter. Keanu ruffled his hair, standing up just as a man in the crowd shouted, "You're a legend, Keanu!" Applause broke out, but Keanu waved it off, his focus still on Ethan. "Want to help me escape this circus?" he joked, winking. Ethan laughed, the sound shaky but real. What Ethan didn't know yet was that this wasn't the end of Keanu's kindness. It was just the beginning. A spark had ignited, one that would light up his and Lena's lives in ways he couldn't imagine. And if you're feeling the warmth of this moment as much as we are, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that'll hit you right in the heart. Ethan stood there, clutching the bag with the snow globe and scarf, his heart still racing from Keanu's kindness. The store buzzed around them, shoppers whispering and snapping photos, but Keanu seemed unfazed, his focus locked on Ethan like nothing else mattered. The applause faded into background noise as Ethan tried to process what had just happened. He'd come here to buy his mom a small gift, something to make her smile, and now he was walking away with two, thanks to a man he'd only ever seen on a screen. But as Keanu straightened up, ready to leave, Ethan caught a glint in his eye, a hint of something more brewing beneath that calm exterior. "Ethan," Keanu said, his voice low and deliberate, "how about we make this an even better day for your mom?" Ethan blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Keanu's grin widened, a spark of mischief mixed with warmth. "You'll see, but I'm going to need your help." Before Ethan could ask more, a woman in a sharp blazer stepped forward from the crowd, her expression professional but kind. She leaned in, whispering something to Keanu, who nodded thoughtfully. Ethan later learned she was his assistant, a quiet force behind the scenes. Keanu glanced back at him. "Hang tight for a sec, okay?" he said, then followed her a few steps away, their voices hushed. Ethan couldn't hear much, just snippets. Single mom, teaching, can we make it happen? But he saw Keanu's face shift. Surprise turned to a frown, then a look of quiet resolve. Ethan shifted on his feet, the bag crinkling in his grip, wondering what was going on. When Keanu turned back, his eyes were softer, almost heavy with purpose. "Ethan," he said, crouching again, "tell me something about your mom. What's her dream? What does she love most, besides you?" The question caught Ethan off guard. Lena didn't talk about herself much. Her life was him, always had been. But then he remembered a night a few months back when he'd woken up to her voice drifting from the kitchen. She'd been on the phone, thinking he was asleep, her tone soft and broken. "I always wanted to teach," she'd said. "But I had Ethan, and that was that." "She wanted to be a teacher," Ethan said now, his voice barely above a whisper. "She loves kids. She started college, but—" He trailed off, guilt twisting in his chest. "She had me. Couldn't finish. People judged her for it, said she threw her life away." His eyes dropped to the floor, the weight of those words pressing down. He'd heard the whispers growing up, neighbors calling her a dropout, a cashier once muttering about girls like her when she paid with food stamps. Society hadn't just turned its back, it had kicked her while she was down, leaving her with no degree, no support, and a kid to raise alone. Ethan hated how unfair it was, how she'd been punished for choosing him. Keanu's hand rested lightly on his shoulder, grounding him. "That's not on you, Ethan," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "She didn't throw anything away. She built something better, you, and the world's wrong for not giving her a chance." Ethan looked up, tears brimming, and saw something fierce in Keanu's gaze. Not pity, but understanding. "Let's make something happen for her, yeah?" Keanu stood, motioning to his assistant, who nodded and pulled out a phone already dialing. Ethan didn't know what something meant, but the way Keanu said it, like a promise, made his heart thud with hope. As they stepped outside, the cold December air hit Ethan's face, snapping him back to reality. The crowd followed, some calling out, but Keanu waved them off with a polite smile, keeping Ethan close. "I should get home," Ethan mumbled, suddenly aware of how late it was. "Mom worries if I'm not back." Keanu crouched one last time. "You trust me to get you there safe?" Ethan nodded, his faith in this stranger growing stronger by the minute. Keanu pulled out his phone, made a quick call, and soon a sleek black SUV pulled up. They climbed in, the leather seats a stark contrast to the frayed couch at home, and as they drove through the city, Ethan found himself talking, really talking. He told Keanu about Lena's late nights, how she'd come home with blisters on her feet but still sit with him to read, her voice soothing even when she could barely keep her eyes open. He talked about her smile, how it never faded even when bills piled up, and how she'd cry sometimes when she thought he couldn't hear, quiet sobs over a life she'd lost. "She gave up everything for me," Ethan said, his voice breaking, "and people act like she's nothing because she's not rich or educated. It's not fair." Keanu listened, his face still nodding, like every word mattered. "It's not," he agreed. "But you see her, Ethan. That's what counts. And we're going to change the story." The SUV stopped outside Ethan's apartment, a crumbling building with peeling paint and a flickering porch light. Keanu walked him to the door, the bag still in Ethan's hands. "Remember what I said," Keanu told him, his tone serious yet warm. "This isn't just about the gifts. Tell her she's incredible, because she is." Ethan nodded, words failing him. Then Keanu added, "Oh, and one more thing. I'll be back tomorrow. Tell her to keep her afternoon free." He ruffled Ethan's hair and walked off, leaving Ethan staring after him, a mix of awe and curiosity swirling inside. Behind the scenes, Keanu's assistant was already at work, pulling strings Ethan couldn't see, calls to a local college, paperwork for a scholarship, a plan to lift Lena up where the world had let her fall. It was more than kindness, it was a quiet rebellion against the unfairness Ethan had named, and the lesson was clear. One stranger's compassion could rewrite a life, reminding us all to believe in the good that still exists. Ethan barely slept that night, his mind spinning with Keanu's parting words. "I'll be back tomorrow." He'd hidden the snow globe and scarf under their tiny Christmas tree, its sparse branches sagging under a single string of lights. Every creak of the apartment building made him jump, half expecting Keanu to appear at the door. When Lena got home from her night shift, her apron still dusted with flour from the diner, Ethan couldn't hold it in. "Mom, you need to stay home tomorrow," he blurted, grinning despite the exhaustion in her eyes. "Someone special's coming." Lena tilted her head, puzzled but amused. "Ethan, what's this about?" she asked, ruffling his hair. "You'll see," he said, his voice trembling with excitement. She laughed softly, too tired to press him, and they fell into their usual routine, her kissing his forehead before collapsing on the couch that doubled as her bed. The next day dragged on, each minute heavier than the last. Lena stayed home, though she fussed over the apartment, wiping down the chipped kitchen table and folding the threadbare blanket on the couch. "It doesn't matter, Mom," Ethan insisted, but she just smiled, a nervous edge to it. "If someone's coming, I don't want them thinking we're a mess." At exactly 2 p.m., a knock echoed through the small space. Ethan bolted to the door, his heart pounding, and flung it open. There stood Keanu Reeves, as promised, holding a large envelope in one hand and a bouquet of simple white lilies in the other. His presence filled the doorway, quiet but commanding, like a calm storm rolling in. Lena froze behind Ethan, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered, her eyes wide as recognition hit. Keanu stepped inside, his smile warm and unassuming. "You must be Lena," he said, extending the flowers. "Ethan's told me so much about you." Lena took the bouquet, her fingers trembling, the white petals a silent promise of something new. I don't understand," she stammered, her cheeks flushing. "What's happening?" Keanu handed her the envelope, his voice gentle but steady. "Sometimes amazing people like you deserve a little help." She opened it with shaky hands, pulling out a stack of papers, a completed scholarship application for a teaching program at a local community college, paired with a letter from Keanu offering to cover tuition, books, even childcare. Everything. Lena's legs buckled, and she sank onto the couch, tears streaming down her face. The apartment, small and worn, seemed to wrap around them like a warm embrace, holding this moment close. Ethan rushed to her side, his own eyes wet, beaming as she clutched the papers to her chest. "How did you?" she started, looking from Ethan to Keanu, her voice breaking. Keanu sat across from her on a rickety chair, leaning forward. "Ethan told me about you yesterday," he said. "How you wanted to be a teacher, how you've given everything for him. I figured it's time someone gave something back." Lena shook her head, tears spilling faster. "You don't know me," she whispered. "Why would you do this?" Keanu's gaze softened, his words slow and deliberate. "I don't need to know you long to see what Ethan sees. A mom who's fought every day to make a life for her kid." "That's enough," Lena sobbed, pulling Ethan into a tight hug, her tears soaking his shoulder. "I've tried so hard," she said, her voice raw, "but it's never enough. He deserves better, better than this." She gestured vaguely at the peeling wallpaper, the second-hand furniture, the life she'd scraped together. "I've felt so helpless, watching him grow up with nothing." Ethan's chest ached. He'd never heard her say it out loud, not like this. He knew she struggled, saw it in the way she'd skip dinner so he could eat, or how she'd mend his shoes with duct tape instead of buying new ones. But hearing the weight of her guilt, the years of quiet despair, cut deeper than he'd expected. "Mom, you're enough," he said, his voice cracking. "You're everything." Keanu leaned in, his tone soft but firm. "Lena, you're not helpless. You've raised a kid who'd walk miles to make you smile. That's not nothing. That's strength. And this," he nodded at the envelope, "this is just a chance to show the world what you've got." Lena looked at him, her eyes searching his face, then down at the flowers still in her lap. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. Keanu smiled, a quiet, steady thing. "Say yes. The world needs more teachers like you, people who know what it means to care." She nodded, a sob catching in her throat. "Thank you," she managed, looking at Keanu, then Ethan. "I don't know why you do this for us, but thank you." Keanu shook his head. "Your son's the real hero here. He loves you so much, it's impossible not to want to help." The room hung heavy with emotion, the three of them sitting there, Ethan and Lena on the couch, Keanu across from them, the lilies resting on the table like a beacon of hope. They talked for a while, Lena opening up about the long nights, the dreams she'd buried, the way she'd kept going for Ethan even when she wanted to give up. Keanu listened, nodding, his presence a steady anchor. The apartment, with its cracks and flaws, felt alive with possibility, like it was breathing alongside them. When he finally stood to leave, he turned to Ethan with a grin. "Take care of her, okay? She's one of the good ones." Ethan nodded, his chest swelling. "I will." As Keanu stepped out, disappearing down the hall, Lena pulled Ethan close, staring at the envelope like it was a miracle. "We're gonna be okay," she whispered, and for the first time, Ethan believed it. This wasn't just a gift. It was a lifeline, a chance to rewrite their story. And if Ethan and Lena's journey is tugging at your heartstrings, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more moments like this. The years that followed felt like a slow, beautiful unraveling of a life once tangled in struggle. Lena took the scholarship Keanu had given her and ran with it, enrolling in the community college's teaching program just weeks after that unforgettable December day. It wasn't easy. There were late nights, hunched over textbooks, shifts at the diner she couldn't quit yet, and moments when doubt crept in, whispering that she was too old, too worn to start over. But every time she faltered, she'd glance at the snow globe on their shelf, its glitter swirling like a reminder of the stranger who'd believed in her when she couldn't. Ethan watched her transform, her tired eyes sparking with purpose, her hands steadier as she scribbled lesson plans instead of wiping tables. 2 years later, she graduated, her cap tilted proudly as Ethan cheered from the crowd. Now a lanky 14-year-old bursting with pride, Lena landed a job teaching second grade at a local elementary school, her classroom a riot of color and laughter, a testament to the dream she'd reclaimed. Ethan grew up too, carrying that day in the toy store like a quiet flame in his chest. He'd sit in their slightly less cramped apartment, Lena's new salary had moved them to a better place, and watch her grade papers, her face lit with a joy he hadn't seen in his earliest memories. She'd become the mom he'd always known she could be, strong, confident, a woman who turned her love for kids into a legacy. Ethan never forgot Keanu's role in it, the way one act of kindness had rippled through their lives, lifting them higher than he'd dared to hope. He'd think about it sometimes, how the world could be cruel but still hold people like that. Quiet heroes who changed everything without asking for applause. Then, years later, on a snowy Christmas Eve in 2020, the past came knocking again. Ethan, now 19 and home from his first semester at college, sat with Lena by their tree, bigger now but still topped with that same snow globe. A delivery man arrived handing over a large, neatly wrapped box addressed to Lena Carter. Confused, she tore it open with Ethan's help, revealing a thick envelope and a handwritten note. Inside the envelope were plane tickets, hotel vouchers, and an itinerary for a week-long family trip to Hawaii. Lena's dream destination, a place she'd mentioned once in passing years ago, laughing it off as a fantasy she'd never chase. The note, in Keanu's unmistakable scrawl, read, "Lena, every teacher deserves a break. You've made a difference. Keep shining. Merry Christmas, Keanu." Lena's hands shook as she pressed the note to her chest, tears spilling down her cheeks. "He remembered," she whispered, her voice thick with awe. Ethan hugged her tight, his own eyes stinging. It wasn't just the trip. It was the proof that kindness didn't fade, that effort paid off in ways they couldn't predict. Lena had fought for years, and now here was a reward she'd never seen coming, a final gift from a man who'd seen her worth when the world hadn't. As they sat there, the snow globe glowing atop the tree, Ethan realized this was what life could be. Hard, yes, but stitched with moments of grace that made it all worthwhile. The lesson sank deep. Perseverance and goodness could bloom into something extraordinary, urging anyone watching to hold on to hope and trust in the power of human connection. Watching Ethan and Lena's story unfold, I can't help but think, kindness like Keanu's is rarer than we'd hope, yet it's the spark that keeps us going. Some might argue it's naive to believe one person can fix a broken system, that Lena's struggles reflect a world too flawed for random acts to heal. I get that. Society's unfairness runs deep, but to me this tale proves small gestures can crack open doors we thought were locked forever. It's not about erasing hardship, it's about lighting a path through it. What do you think? Can a stranger's compassion really change a life, or is it just a feel-good fluke? Drop your take in the comments. I'd love to hear it. Thanks for joining us on this journey. If stories like this move you, subscribe and stick around for more. Let's keep the conversation going.